Everybody knows Ash Ketchum as the greatest Pokemon trainer of all time, but we're here to see if him and his collection of Pokemon are good enough to beat all 200 waves of Pokerogue and defeat Eternitus. Ash has had a lot of Pokemon through his 25 years in the anime, but obviously Pikachu is his most notable partner. With him, I decided to add my personal favorites, being Gligar to evolve into Gliscor, and Froakie to get Battle Bond Greninja. I had 3 extra points remaining, so I decided to throw in Galarian Farfetch'd, as I think he's criminally underrated, and I actually really like that Pokemon. To start our journey out, we encountered a Taillow, which I ended up catching because it will evolve into Swellow. With our new Gutsy Bird added to our team, it was time to fight Ivy for the first time. She sends in her Fennekin as I send in Froakie, and I land a Water Gun before getting hit with 2 Embers, taking me down to just 3 HP. Fennekin does go down to a second Water Gun as she sends in Pikipek, which I hit with a Moonblast. It doesn't do quite enough to take it out though, as Froakie goes down to a Peck as I decide to send in Gligar. I go for a fly, and after coming back down, we take down Pikipek in just 1 turn. With the first fight out of the way, I was pretty confident in our abilities, and for reward we got the Shiny Stone. However, I was not allowed to use it, as I'm not allowed to evolve Pikachu in this run because Ash never did. With Ivy out the way, it was time to fight the first gym leader, Silent. Silent specializes in grass types, which means all I had to use was Gligar and just use Fly a couple of times, knocking out both Snivy and Pansage, getting us our first badge. A lot happened between now and the next gym as we evolved a Froakie into Frogadier before going on to smack up Ivy for the second time. After this, we had a couple evolutions, with Taillow evolving into Swellow and getting the Toxic Orb, activating Swellow's Guts ability, making it harder, and evolving a Frogadier into Greninja. This was so big for a certain reason that you guys will see soon. It was now time for our second gym fight against the water type leader, Marlin. I decided to go for a Baneful Bunker, trying to poison the Mantine, but it didn't really work out as I just got Bubble Beamed and Gligar went down. I decided to throw in our ace, Pikachu, and go for an Electro Ball that should one-shot due to quad effectiveness, but it did less than half. So we actually went down to a couple of Bubble Beams and I sent in Greninja. And now you guys see why getting this Greninja was so important. It has the Battle Bond ability, making it one of Ash's most iconic Pokemon of all time. Our Farfetch'd evolving to Surfetch, giving it a big power up boost that we're definitely going to be needing as we go on in this challenge. After all that change, we got back to the battle as he sent in Whelmer, and I ended up knocking it out with 1 use of Fiery Wrath. Tortuga came in and met the exact same fate, as Battle Bonded Greninja is just way too broken, and Frillish, as she's super weak to Fiery Wrath, goes down to 1 hit as well, giving us our second gym badge. After breezing past a few Team Magma Grunts, it was time for our next gym fight against Gym Leader Grant. Grant decided to lead with his Pupitar as we sent in our half-health Greninja. I went for Water Shuriken, but it only hit twice, so we went down to an Earthquake, proccing our Reviver Seed. We go for another Water Shuriken that hits 3 times this time, and we get our Battle Bonded form. Don't get too excited though, because this didn't last long as Grant sent out Crustle, and Water Shuriken was not enough to take down this crab, meaning that we went down to 1 X-Scissor. Luckily for us, we just evolved our Farfetch'd into Surfetch'd, which means that with 1 use of Leaf Blade, we would be able to take down the Crustle. Until he threw out his Tyrantrum, and we had to use a Sacred Sword on that, taking it down to 1 HP. Barbaric will get sent out just for fodder because he goes down in 1 hit, as Aurorus gets sent out against the 4 times effective Sacred Sword. At this point I was confident Surfetch was just going to sweep the team, and that's exactly what ended up happening. As Tyrantrum gets sent back out and falls right back down, Crustle is then sent back out and meets the exact same fate, securing our victory against Gym Leader Grant. On Wave 83, we encountered a Crocodile, and I was very excited for this as Crocodile is one of my favorite Pokemon when it comes to Ash's team, and he pretty much carried the entire generation he was featured in. After catching our Crocodile, we encountered a weird time machine that we stepped into and got teleported into the vacuum of space. But then after that, it was time to fight our next gym leader, Winona. The flying type gym leader led out with Hawlucha, which I hit with a Moonblast, knocking it out in just 1 hit due to a critical hit. This activates Frogger's Battle Bond, which means now it's basically Mega Evolved, and we one-shot Tropius, knocking him out immediately. Pelipper comes in and activates Drizzle, but I don't really care as I just go for a Fiery Wrath, knocking out Pelipper in yet again 1 hit. I go for a Moonblast, seeing the Dragon type, but he ends up terrorizing into a flying type, which means Altaria does take 2 hits to go down after getting us to just half HP. This steps Masquerain to be able to come in and knock out Frogger in just 1 hit before going down to Poison. I didn't know who she would send out next, so I decided to just throw in Pikachu as it is a flying type gym leader and I figured it'd be alright. She ends up sending in Skarmory, and like I predicted, this ended up being a great matchup for us, as Pikachu is able to take down Skarmory, securing our next gym badge. We're right back at it with the gym leaders as it's time to fight Marlin. He throws out his Slowbro as I throw in Pikachu, and I decide to go for a Peek-a-Pow, taking down Slowbro to just half HP. Slowbro goes for a Squishy Splash, taking down my Pikachu, as per usual, and I decide to throw in Crocodile and go for a Crunch. This didn't work out as I planned, as he sends in Mantine, so I decided to switch into Swellow, taking a Hydro Pump, but Swellow went down in just 1 hit. I set in Surfetch and go for a Leaf Blade, which takes Jellicent down to just 1 HP, before getting healed back up with an Enigma Berry. Mantine comes out and tanks a Leaf Blade, which does end up taking it out, meaning we got a free kill. Kingdra comes in, and I decide to go for a Leaf Blade, and it does a little bit over half its HP. Knowing this, I realized I had to switch as the Citrus Berry healed up Kingdra to over half HP, and I decided to send in Gligar, which still hasn't evolved because I haven't found the item yet. I go for a Baneful Bunker just to get an extra PP stall, it didn't really serve any purpose, and then I decide to go for 1,000 Waves, which I do end up outspeeding, taking Kingdra down to about a quarter HP. I knew that Surfetch would outspeed Kingdra, so I decided to send him back in and go for a Leaf Blade, taking out Kingdra in 1 more hit. At this point, it was pretty much Surfetch versus everyone, as Jellicent comes out and terrestrializes, but gets one-shot by Leaf Blade. Surfetch then sees Slowbro and decides to execute him just as well. At this point, it was just Surfetch versus Marlin, and I don't think there was anything he could have thrown out that would have taken down this bird. Wailord goes down to another Leaf Blade, and now it's just Caracasa with its 4 times weakness. It does end up living on Sturdy, but it misses the Stone Edge, meaning it just goes down the next turn. And that is how we took down Marlin with basically just one of our birds. It is time for the ever so important Wave 145, and more importantly, our rival battle against Ivy. This is so important because she makes her debut with Shiny Tier 2 Rayquaza. I do end up getting Rayquaza down to its 2nd health bar with 1 use of Water Shuriken before realizing that I'm probably just going to die, and I should probably switch to keep Frogger alive. I didn't really have a great choice of Pokemon against Rayquaza, so I just throw in Pikachu and it just gets one-shot by Outrage, but this means I can just send in Gligar and get a Baneful Bunker off, poisoning Rayquaza in the process. This was pretty much my entire strategy, as Gligar did take 1 Outrage and I was able to use Fly, avoiding the next attack. On the way back down, it knocked Rayquaza down to his last HP bar, and the poison was still chipping. I went for another Baneful Bunker, getting Rayquaza down to just below his 2nd HP bar because he keeps healing with Citrus Berries, before getting knocked out by an Air Slash. The poison will do its job eventually though, as I just keep using Protect Stall moves, but Ivy ends up switching into Gengar, likely seeing that the poison stall was happening. Gengar does go down in just 1 hit, and next up, Ivy sends back out her Rayquaza, which I was able to use King Shield, chipping it down just a little bit more. After this, I tried to go for a Sacred Sword, but I got outsped and got one-shot by Air Slash as Rayquaza goes down to the red. I send Frogger, seeing the kill, and decide to go for a Moonblast, as Excalibur gets sent in, but just gets annihilated in the process, proccing our Battle Bond. Now, our Greninja is superpowered, and we are able to get Dondozo down to just the red with 1 move, before Toucannon comes in and goes down immediately to a Fiery Wrath on the switch-in. Delphox comes down, and knowing that Ivy always terrestrializes her starter Pokemon, I end up going for a Water Shuriken. This did not matter though, as Delphox actually outsped Battle Bond Greninja. I did not think that that was a possibility, but here we are. I looked into this in post, and I actually realized that Psychic Terrain blocks priority moves, and I had no clue that Water Shuriken was a priority move prior to this run, so that's why I didn't work on the Delphox. I didn't get outsped. Predicting a switch into Rayquaza, I ended up clicking Outrage, but Delphox ended up staying in for 1 turn before Rayquaza came out, which actually didn't matter too much, as Rayquaza still comes in and goes down to 1 hit by Outrage. Delphox comes back in, but I'm still locked into Outrage because after getting a KO with it, it keeps going and you don't get confused. I take 2 more Mystical Fires as I land an Earthquake, one-shotting the Delphox, forcing Ivy to send in her last Pokemon, Dondozo. After Dondozo goes down to just one more Earthquake, I officially secured my victory against my rival Ivy. On wave 165, I actually fought against team boss Maxi and his team of fire types and Groudon, but he wasn't too much of a problem as fire is probably the type we're the best against and Groudon stood basically no chance. It was now time for the final gym leader of the fight, Kofu, and his team of water types. He leads with Sharpedo but ends up switching to Pelipper, which ends up taking the Leaf Blade pretty well, taking it down to half HP. Veluza then gets switched in, but doesn't have the same luck as it ends up getting one shot by Leaf Blade before Wugtrio comes in with a Liquidation, taking our Surf Edge to half HP. A Leaf Blade takes down Wugtrio in just one hit, and Pelipper comes back out to meet the exact same fate. So far so good for the bird as Crabominable comes in, and I go for a Sacred Sword, not realizing he would just switch to a water type with Terastallization. Surf Edge goes down, and I decided to throw in Pikachu since it hasn't gotten much love this run, but he just sends in Relicanth, and I end up taking it down to about half HP before the Citrus Berry procs. And knowing Pikachu was not taking a shot from this, I decided to just go for another Pika Papao, because why not, before I get one shot by an Earthquake from the Relicanth. Pikachu is seriously not doing great for my team. I don't know how Ash managed to use this thing for the entire show. Greninja comes out and ends up hitting a Fiery Wrath against Sharpedo, which isn't a very effective move, but takes it down to about 45 HP. Sharpedo goes down to a Water Shuriken and Relicanth comes back out, before going down to a Fiery Wrath, and Crabominable comes back out to go down to the exact same thing, securing our win against the leader. We're now on wave 182, which means it's time for the Elite Four, and we're facing off against Shantel for the first time. Kofu comes in first and ends up going down to one Fiery Wrath, proccing our Battle Bond ability, making us super goated. Jellicent comes out and meets almost the exact same fate, but due to her special bulk, she does survive on just 1 HP. Golurk, however, does not have that same bulk and goes down to just one hit. I was pretty confident that I would just outspeed a one-shot with Fiery Wrath the rest of this battle, and that is exactly what ends up happening, as Chandelure, despite having 2 health bars, has less health than Jellicent, so it also goes down to one hit. Miss Magius meets the exact same fate, and at this point it's just a point-and-click adventure, as I just wait for her to throw in all her Pokemon before I can just take them all down in one hit. So that secures our victory against our first Elite Four member Shantel, and it wasn't even a cakewalk, it was more of just like a landslide, I guess. Maybe that first matchup was just preparation, because I was up against Marshall next. Throw starts out, so I send in Pikachu, and I go down to 39 HP immediately from a Revenge that had no damage boost. I go for a Pika Papao and do about 1/10 of Throw's HP before going down to just the next turn. Swellow then comes out and hits a Brave Bird, taking Throw to about 15% HP, before it getting brought down to just 58. The Guts does proc from the poison, and I take out Throw with just one more Brave Bird, but I also go down in the process. Mienshao gets thrown out, and I decide to go in with Gligar and go for a Baneful Bunker, in hopes that I would get the poison on the Mienshao. That didn't happen, because for some reason Mienshao has Focus Blast, before hitting me with a high jump kick. I go with a Fly, and it raises its accuracy with Home Claws, but it doesn't matter as I just one-shot on the way back down. Glade then gets sent in, and I go with the exact same strategy, but this time I actually get the poison on it. I go for a Fly, putting me up in the air as it misses a Psyblade, and on the way back down, I knocked out the Glade in just one more hit. Despite not being fully evolved, this Gligar is doing some great work. I go for another Baneful Bunker, landing another Poison proc on the Conkeldurr, before doing the exact same strategy, going up with Fly. Fly was not enough to one-shot this time though, and Conkeldurr does hit a superpower, but I lived, meaning that just one more Fly would be more than enough to take down this Conkeldurr. Seriously, who needs a Razor Fang when you could just use the Gligar? Like, imagine if I had a Gliscor, this would be so much easier. Anyways, Toxicroak comes out, and I go for a Baneful Bunker for some reason, even though Toxicroak's a poison type, so it doesn't really matter, as it can't be poisoned. But I end up going for a Fly, and all the way back down, I get it down to just 1 HP. But, apparently, this Gligar is an absolute beast, as it survives a Dark Pulse from Toxicroak on 14 HP, and then takes it out with one more Fly. You can count how many times I just said Fly in this fight, it's probably a lot. And I end up using 1,000 Waves, taking down Emboar to just 10% HP, before going down to a Flare Blitz. Unfortunately for Gligar, he couldn't complete the sweep, but it's okay, as Frogger comes in and finishes the job just for him. Next up was Elite Four, Grimsley, and his team of dark types wouldn't be too much a problem for me, as I do have access to Moonblast, which with Battle Bond and Greninja procced would probably be more than enough to take down this entire team, but we'll just have to wait and see. Both Liepard and Scrafty go down to just one Moonblast, and it's looking pretty good, before Samurott comes in and meets the exact same fate, likely due to a critical hit. I'm not actually sure if the critical hit mattered there, but I don't know. But King Gambit comes in, and now Moonblast isn't that effective, as I go for a Water Shuriken, taking it down to just half HP. I go for one more Water Shuriken, and likely due to a crit, because with my luck I probably would have only hit twice, it goes down in just one more turn. Liepard comes back in and gets hit with a Moonblast, because apparently I didn't knock it out the first turn. Krookodile comes in and terrestrializes it into just a dark type, but it doesn't matter as Moonblast is more than enough to just take it out in one hit, securing our victory against Grimsley. Last up but not least was Elite Four Caitlyn and her team of psychic types. She leads with Musharna, which I immediately hit with a Fiery Wrath, which takes it down to about 10% of its HP, but it wasn't enough to one-shot, meaning we got hit by a Moonblast. Frogger does end up taking down the Musharna on the next turn, getting the Battle Bond to proc, before seeing a Gallade and going for Moonblast. I thought this would one-shot for sure, but apparently this Gallade was pretty bulky, and it ends up tanking the Moonblast, knocking us out with one Sacred Sword. This was not great for us, as I entirely planned on Greninja sweeping through this entire fight. There is very little time for hesitation in the midst of battle though, as I send in Surfetched and get a King Shield off, dropping Gallade's attack stat by just one stage. This was not enough to save Surfetched from the incoming Psyblade, and I go down in one hit. Pikachu, to nobody's surprise, comes in and just gets straight up murdered immediately, as I send in Swellow going for a quick attack for the kill. Caitlyn ends up switching in Sigilith, and that wasn't great for me, but I do end up getting the Brave Bird off, taking it down to just 1 HP. I couldn't believe it. I genuinely thought I one-shot it, but here we are. Gothitelle ends up coming in, predicting the quick attack once again, and I end up Brave Birding it, taking it down to half its HP, before Swellow goes down to a Psyshock. At this point, all I really had left was Krookodile, as I didn't know Gligar would be enough to finish the job, so I was hoping Crunch would be more than enough to take down this team, and we'll just have to wait and see. Weirdeer was strong enough to take one Crunch, but definitely not enough for two, as it goes down on the next turn. Uniqueness comes in, and I go for a Crunch, which takes it down to about a third of its HP before it retaliates with a Signal Beam. I am now pretty worried about Krookodile, as if I take a hit from anything I go down, but I just have to hope we outsped. We knocked out Reniculus and Sigilith just with one more turn of Crunch, before Gallade comes in, and I do actually outspeed, killing it with one more Crunch. It was just Gothitelle left, and another Crunch secured our victory against the Psychic type leader Caitlyn, and let us move on to the champion. This Elite Four path was pretty easy, but now it's time to see if Champion Iris has anything to say about that. I lead off with a Moonblast against Druddigan, which takes it down to about 25% of its HP, before it lands a Crunch just doing 95 damage to Frogger, meaning that I basically got Battle Bond proc for free, as I'm only down about 100 HP. Iris then sends in Archaeolodon, and I was pretty scared as an Electro Shot from this thing would one-shot me, but apparently so would a Body Press. Archaeolodon is at about 10% HP, which means no matter what I send in, as long as it's basically not Pikachu, is guaranteed to take this thing down. I send in Surfetched and go for a Sacred Sword, which ends up one-shotting the Archeops, not the Archaeolodon, which still works. Reshiram comes in, which I'm pretty sure she did not have in the game, and I go for a King Shield, just taking one turn of PP. I go for a Sacred Sword, knocking down Reshiram to just half HP, as I go for one more King Shield, for whatever reason. I don't know why I thought that would actually help me, but it doesn't matter. Krookodile comes in and knocks Reshiram's attack down by one stage, before Lapras comes in its G-Max form. I don't know why I decided to go with Outrage here, as if I wasn't just going to get Ice Beam to Oblivion, but you know what? Hindsight's 2020. Pikachu comes in and finally gets the chance to do something, but Haxorus gets switched in and Pika Papow does literally nothing. I decide to go for an Iron Tail, because why not? As in the anime, it always one-shots anything it hits, but it never got the chance to hit. So Pikachu goes down in just one turn, once again, nobody's surprised, as our goat Gligar comes back in and gets a Baneful Bunker off, which doesn't actually poison the Haxorus. I go up with a Fly and come back down, knocking Haxorus down to just half HP, before I go with another Baneful Bunker that actually does poison the dragon. I end up going for one more Fly after taking a Breaking Swipe, and I don't think I would one-shot due to the one attack stat getting knocked down by Breaking Swipe. I do get another poison off due to the poison touch ability that I got from unlocking Gligar's passive, and this just means I got to stall out Haxorus to poison. Lapras comes back out, and I just end up going for 1,000 waves for whatever reason, and I do not manage to take down Lapras with one more hit. Now, it was just up to Swellow against a very bad type matchup, and I decided to just go for Brave Bird as I wasn't convinced Quick Attack would do much damage to take it out. We do get the Guts boost on the next turn, meaning that Brave Bird was more than enough to slash the dragon down in just one turn. This meant that we're down to Iris' last Pokemon, being Archaludon, which Brave Bird was enough with the Guts boost to take down in just one turn, securing our win against the champion. Y'all know what time it is. It's time for the last fight against our rival Ivy with her Tier 2 shiny Mega Rayquaza. But I was prepared this time as I go for a Moonblast, taking it down to just half HP on the first turn that it's in. I send in Pikachu and you guys know what was about to happen. Pikachu goes down to just one Outrage and yeah, you won't really be missed. I end up sending in Gligar and go for a Baneful Bunker, which ends up poisoning the giant dragon that does not have a Lumberry. This means that for the rest of this battle, Rayquaza will be on a timer, which we can use to our benefit. I decide to send in Surfetched and end up going for a King Shield, knocking Rayquaza's attack stat down by just one stage. Now, I don't know if this was enough to actually stop anything from dying in one hit, but you know what, it's better to try than not to. I decide to switch in Swellow as I found that Surfetch would probably be more useful in the future, and he ends up switching into a Gengar. Gengar does go down in just one turn to a Brave Bird, and I get the Guts proc, but Excalibur was a perfect counter to our Gutsy Bird, so I decide to send Surfetch back in, which takes a takedown pretty well. I decided to go for a Sacred Sword, but Ivy predicted this and switched to Delphox, which does still get 1 HP bar knocked off. I decided to go back into Swellow, and as Delphox terrestrializes the Fire type, Psychic was still enough to take Swellow down in just one turn. I send out Frogger, and knowing that she was going to switch, I decided to go for Moonblast, trying to predict the Rayquaza. Dondozo's the one that comes in though, and that means it's going to take 3 turns to take down this oversized catfish, but with one more use of Fiery Wrath, that's exactly what happened. Ivy sends out Excalibur, and it gets annihilated by a Moonblast immediately, which means that she had 3 more Pokemon to throw out. She decides to go in with Toucannon, and for some reason, I decided that it'd be a good idea to switch into Surfetched, which does not take a Drill Peck and goes down immediately. I don't really know what my thought process was there, I'm not gonna lie. I send Crocodile, which does get Toucannon's attack stat down by 1 with Intimidate, before I go for an Outrage, hoping that I'd be able to take it out and then hit the Rayquaza. This is not what happened though, as I do end up taking down the Toucannon with an Outrage, living on 15% HP. Rayquaza comes out, but I just get outsped because it's a Mega Rayquaza, and Crocodile goes down. I'm not gonna lie, things are not looking great for us right now, as the only Pokemon we have left is Greninja. Greninja does outspeed Mega Rayquaza though, and I end up taking it down with 1 Moonblast. This means it was just between Delphox and Greninja, and I had switched out Water Shuriken for Hydro Pump just for this moment. I go with Hydro Pump and it connects, taking down the Magical Fox with just 1 more turn, securing our final win against Ivy, allowing us to go on to the final fight of the game. Our team has done really well this entire run, and now it's time to put them up against the final challenge. So in a way, just as Ash Ketchum did in the region of Galar, we are also fighting the Galarian legendary Eternitus. We lead off the fight with Gligar, but I wasn't really happy with that, so I switched into Crocodile, getting the Intimidate off and tanking an Eternating. This was super important because we were able to land an Earthquake on the Eternatus during its recharge turn. Now this only did 1 health bar, meaning that Crocodile was guaranteed to go down to another Eternabeam, so what do you think I did? If you guessed sacrifice the Swellow, you were correct, because that is exactly what I did, and then I sent out Frogger to hopefully do more than 1 health bar, forcing Eternitus into its Eternamax form. Somehow, someway, Greninja tanks an Eternabeam to the face on just 30% HP. I was able to hit a Fiery Wrath the very next turn, forcing Eternitus into its Eternamax form. This was great because while it transforms, it actually doesn't use a move, meaning Greninja got to live for at least 1 more turn. Surfetch comes in, and this was huge because Surfetch has access to 2 moves that are going to be pivotal in this battle. King Shield to block damage, and Knockoff to negate Eternitus' mini black hole item. The mini black hole is an item that allows Eternitus to steal 1 held item off of our team after every single turn, so using Knockoff completely negates this item, as whatever item it picks up is simply just going to be knocked off the exact same turn, meaning it doesn't even get the proc. Frogger does go down to a Dynamax Cannon, and this was alright because it pretty much served its purpose, as Pikachu comes in. I know what you guys are thinking, Pikachu's gonna do nothing, right? Wrong. This Eternitus had no Lum Berry, which means that the paralysis is going to do work. Our Pikachu, who's done nothing this entire run, hasn't even knocked out a Pokemon, has actually came in probably the most clutch in this entire run against the biggest boss of the game. And you know what? That is how legends are made, so I forgive Pikachu. I know I talked a lot of trash on Pikachu this entire run, but you know what? It came in clutch when it mattered most, and I respect it. We send in Gligar after our GOAT Pikachu goes down, and I end up just going for 1000 Waves and King Shield in order to get some good chip. Gligar does have 1000 Waves thanks to the Egg move I unlocked many runs ago, so that means Gligar actually gets to get pretty good damage output despite not being a Gliscor. Gligar does get hit with a Flamethrower that does maybe 20% of his HP, meaning that our Pokemon were going to be left in here for quite a while. Surfetch gets hit with a Flamethrower that does about 25% of its HP, but I don't even know how it's been in the battle this long, and I'm not complaining. I go for another knockoff 1000 Waves combo, and Eternitus is officially under its last health bar. Flamethrower does end up burning Gligar on this turn, which was not great because that meant that every single move Gligar has was only going to do 50% of its damage capability. I did run out of PP on 1000 Arrows though, which means that it didn't really matter that I was burned anyways, as every other move that I had on Gligar probably wasn't going to do much. I go for a double knockoff, and Eternitus is officially at half of its last health bar. Krookodile comes in, and I Terrasilize into the ground type and click Earthquake to do as much damage as I possibly can. King Shield allows Surfetch to survive this turn, which was pivotal as on the final turn of our 200 waves, our Terralized Krookodile manages to Earthquake both our Surfetch and the Eternitus, leaving Krookodile alone as the only survivor, securing our win in this POKEROGUE challenge. If you guys enjoyed this run, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as I really do appreciate the love, and I will catch all of you guys in the next video.